What's up, y'all? Welcome back to the podcast. In this episode, we are talking to Chelsea Grayson, former CEO of True Religion and American Apparel. We're talking about board seats and corporate positioning, all the things you need to know about the corporate structure. You do not want to miss this episode. Let's go. Welcome to the Imperfect Action Show.
Thank you.
And what's cool about today's episode is, before I introduce my guest, is I'm actually rebranding my other podcast.
Okay.
Because what I realized is the Imperfect Action Show was basically started by me just wanting to go live every day on Instagram, and then they banned me, so I had to go live on.
Why did they ban? Oh, because was it too long for the format?
No, they banned me. Well, I got banned it because I had uploaded a testimonial for one of my clients.
Okay.
So I don't know if it was like how she said a word or just the way that the algorithm like processed maybe the tonality of what she was saying.
Yeah.
But they flagged it. And then I thought it was a mistake.
Yeah.
So I reposted it. And then they flagged it, and then they shut me down for like 2 weeks.
They shut down your Instagram?
They shut down the live, me going live.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But not your whole account.
Not the whole account.
Okay.
So then I just navigated over to YouTube.
Right.
I started going YouTube live.
Yeah.
And by the time I got to the third episode, I was like, oh, we taking the perfect action right now.
Yeah.
So then that's when I got the idea.
Yeah.
So Imperfect Action has over 125 episodes. Art of Pursuit, which is primarily my main like sit down. That one we got about 40.
Wow, you're so prolific.
However,
that's a lot of content generation.
A lot of content.
Yeah.
However, since the Imperfect Action, like it kind of like started taking on a brand of its own, I'm just gonna phase out On the Pursuit, make that Imperfect Action. I got a whole conference, Imperfect Action Con. You know what I mean? So
I know.
Yeah, and then I'm just gonna ramp up the YouTube content.
Yeah.
So we just going crazy.
You're digital. You're in real life. Like,
yeah.
Where aren't you? They need to make an NFT about you, right?
I mean, we got some of that stuff cooking. So in today's episode, I got a friend of mine. We met a couple years ago. Maybe 4 years now. I think I met you when I first moved to LA.
We met through fitness, yeah.
When I first moved to LA.
You got here, yeah.
It was at a Equinox event.
Equinox.
It was an event, like they had like a little activation going on.
With a mutual friend,
100%. And then we just started talking because you're very like social. I'm pretty social, so it's very natural.
But the difference is I fake my social.
No way.
I'm an ambivert.
What's that?
That means I'm an introvert with extraordinarily well-faked extrovert skills.
So I'm an
ambivert.
So I'm the omnivert. I don't know about the ambivert.
Omnivert?
Yeah.
Okay, what's that?
That's both.
That's okay.
I could thrive by myself and I could thrive with people.
Okay, yeah. So I'm a little different. So I have to charge alone. I charge my batteries alone. So I'm fine. I'm out. I am social. Yes, I've got huge circles and lots of them, and I can put them all together and slice it all apart. But at the end of the day, there comes a point in time during every day where I'm like, I've reached my limit and I need to go be in solitude.
Gotcha.
But you don't need that.
No. I'm good. Like I can be around people crazy, and I can be by myself crazy.
And you're not exhausted when you're around people.
No, but I'll tell you what though. I really do love being alone. And I think more people should appreciate being alone because I think you get a lot out of being alone.
Absolutely.
Like taking the morning walks, hitting the gym by yourself, reading a book. Sometimes just getting in the car, going to get food. Like that's like you need that time to think and process.
Yeah, the whole going out to dinner alone thing.
I used to go to movies alone a lot.
Yeah. I actually like going to movies. I think I've maybe seen one movie alone ever in life, but I feel like it was great because...
You saw one movie alone in your whole life?
Yeah. Not like, I like in a theater, but and it's good because nobody's in your ear like, or like laughing or trying to get your attention about something. You're just completely focused on the movie,
I would say that.
Just digesting it, so.
So I wanted to bring you on because I think you have an amazing story. Former CEO of American Apparel and, another amazing brand.
True Religion.
Yeah. And actually, I remember 2 Chainz had me going crazy about True Religion because, he was all about it at the time.
Yeah.
But then transitioning to a lot of amazing things after being a high performer.
Yeah.
Being a mom,
I am.
Being
soon to be an empty nester.
Facts. So I wanted to bring you on because I just think that you have an amazing story. You're an amazing person. And you're always helpful and always looking out for other people. So I just, I was just curious, what does life look like after for a CEO of like two amazing brands that are well known? Like what happens next? So why don't we start there?
Yeah. I mean, well, what happens next, I guess, is best explained by what happened before.
Exactly. I like that.
Because it's always the seeds that you planted 2 decades ago that are now just coming, they're green shoots and then they bloom and you're watering them along the way, you know? And so you have to really have plans decades ahead of time to really hit big in a few decades, So I started out.
So you're talking about always thinking long term.
Always thinking long term. And short term too, because you have to pivot, you know? So you got to pay attention to a lot of stuff. But if you're not thinking long term, unless you're just really fortunate, unless you're Forrest Gump, you're just going to stumble across fortune. It's probably not going to happen as big as it would have if you would have plotted out your course. Yeah. Sort of. Again, like you always have to zig and zag and pivot because there's shit that happens and you weren't predicting it and you've got to be able to be nimble on your feet.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you know this. So I was, for the first 20 years of my career, I was a lawyer.
No, I think I do remember you sharing that with me, but I don't think we talked in detail about that.
Because nobody cares about that. That's not really that interesting.
What type of law?
But it was interesting to me. So that's the interesting part, what type of law. So I was a mergers and acquisitions lawyer.
Yep.
So I bought and sold companies. So I was a lover, not a fighter, because the fighters are the litigators. We do deals. We wanted to bring people together and kumbaya and then go off and make a lot of money together. And so I was a partner at Jones Day, which is one of the biggest law firms in the world.
Yep.
And I ran M&A there for the California region. And I co-chaired the firm's global cross-border practice. So I was on the road a lot, always have been. First in Europe a lot and then in Asia, starting out in, so you might imagine, Japan and China, and then ultimately in India, before I pivoted out of the law. So, but that laid a basis for me for what I'm now doing. So I'll get to that. But so that laid a basis actually even for when I got to American Apparel. So that was me being in the boardroom a lot, which is a dynamic that a lot of people aren't used to.
Yeah.
I don't mean a startup boardroom. I mean like a actual big public company, Fortune 50, Fortune 100 boardrooms where there's a lot of governance and there's very specific ways that things happen and there's a format and people expect certain things in a certain order and you have to understand a lot of different issues and you have to be able to rip the numbers apart and put them back together. And so this is a very formal circumstance that only probably 1% ever get to really see and experience, So I got really experienced there in terms of just advising companies from within the companies and within the boardroom. That's how I got recruited originally to join American Apparel as the general counsel, was because of my reputation as a lawyer in private practice. And then, as you know, and I'll fast forward past this part, but because I'm sure we'll get there, I ultimately was promoted from the general counsel seat to the CEO seat at American Apparel, sold that company to another big public company called Gildan.
I remember them. Yeah.
Right. And then I was asked to join True Religion as the CEO and a board member because one of our owners at American Apparel was Goldman Sachs, along with a bunch of other hedge funds. And Goldman Sachs came to me after I sold American Apparel and said, you want to do deja vu all over again? Because we also own True Religion. Come over and do the same thing over there. So that was my first board. I was on the board at American Apparel, but True Religion was one of my first board appointments that was aside and apart from my history with the company. So I came right in as a board member and the CEO. And I was also appointed to the board of Delta Dental, of all things, at the same time. Big $9 billion dental health insurance company that doesn't sound that exciting, but it's actually, there's a lot of disruption in the market. A lot of people find that health insurance on the dental side isn't interesting isn't something that's accrues to you financially because it doesn't cover a lot anyways. And so a lot of people are going direct to consumer, Invisalign or teeth whitening centers or whatever. So there's actually disruption in that market. But it was there, while I was sitting on that board and while I was at True Religion that I conceived of what this third chapter of my career would look like. Because of having had all of that boardroom experience and then having those 2 board seats specifically and the American Apparel board seat under my belt, I realized the third chapter could be mostly sitting on boards, mostly public company boards, because public company board seats come with both a director fee that you get annually, so actually cash in your pocket, and equity in that company.
Every time you sit on the board.
Yeah. And so if it's a public company, it's immediately tradable unless you're in a blackout period, meaning you know something the public doesn't know, so you can't trade that stock because insider trading. And so that's interesting because it's immediately liquid and it grows and grows and grows with the company. But if it's a private company, and it's a private company that ultimately is going to have a liquidity event, so it's going to go public or it's going to sell, and most private companies are heading towards a liquidity event, then that equity is going to be worth a lot of money. So you just have to wait for it to be liquid.
Yeah.
So either way, sitting on boards, if you string a few of them together, you've got a really nice annual income in cash. And you know you've got this massive lump sum coming to you eventually if the company succeeds and the stock takes off. And that's why they give directors equity, because then your incentives as a board member are aligned with the stakeholders in the company who are the shareholders. You both want the stock to grow because part of your compensation is in the stock.
Is in the stock.
Right. So after I left True Religion right before COVID, I picked up a whole bunch of additional board seats. So we can talk about those if you want to in specific detail, but I picked up a whole bunch of board seats and figured out I could actually make a living just sitting on boards, and that I really like doing this. This is a really perfect part, third chapter to my career. So that's what I'm doing now, mostly sitting on boards. And I'm also an executive in residence with the leading MarTech company, marketing technologies company in the country, Wonderkind.
What's up, y'all? It's Brennan Boy, and one of the best things that has helped me go to the next level is powerful affirmations. I would say them every single day, literally when I open my eyes. So I put together these powerful affirmation cards to help you get to the next level, right? With powerful statements like, I live in abundance, or statements like, I'm not a prisoner of my limiting beliefs. Now, if you say these things to yourself every single day, using the power of repetition, you're gonna believe the things that you wanna achieve. So look, grab your affirmation deck, or your manifestation deck, or your money manifestation deck. Let's grow your mindset, and let's get you to the next level, right? Click that link below, grab your cards, let's go. So I think that's interesting, right? So figuring out that you can sit on boards, but multiple boards.
Yeah.
Is that something that a lot of people are doing? Like, is that pretty normal for people to like have multiple board seats?
Yeah. I mean, so that's a really good question. So a lot in the sense of people who sit on boards tend to sit on more than one board.
That's what I'm saying.
Those of us who sit on boards tend to do this for a living. There's some people who are still operators. That's a whole different group of folks, and you want them on your board as well. But they can really only have one board seat, because otherwise, they've got their full-time job being a CEO of whatever, or the CMO, you wouldn't really have time for more than one board seat, So some people sit on one board seat if they still have a full-time job. Most of us are out here doing this in, having groups of boards that we sit on. But there's a phrase called overboarded. And
that's when you sit on too many boards.
Too many boards, yeah. And ISS and Glass Lewis and the other ratings agencies that judge companies on their governance in their boardroom take a hard look at that. So if you run into somebody who's like, I sit on 5 public company boards, maybe they need to dial that back. I wouldn't want that person sitting on my public company board.
Yeah.
You want that experience historically. You want them to have had a lot of board seats historically, but you wouldn't want them to have that many public company seats. Private companies a little different. The fiduciary duties are, technically the same, but the liability is less. There's a lot less, arguably sometimes less work on a private company board. So and the audit committee is a little bit different, right? So you could, if you're stringing a bunch of private company boards together with some public company boards, maybe you can get away with it. But generally speaking, you wouldn't want anything more than like in total 5, and maybe 3 of those public, 3 or 4 of those public, and 1 or 2 of those private.
And then what is like some of the responsibilities for somebody sitting on multiple boards like that though?
Yeah.
Like how do you able to manage all those seats?
I mean, you for sure have to have your calendar right. So you either need an executive assistant working with you, or you just need to manage your calendar very right, because there's a pace to each company, and particularly public companies, where you have to have your quarterly board meetings. Usually those are in person, except during COVID, but now we're all starting to get back to in person. So you got to fly to wherever it is. You got to make time for travel. And those quarterly board meetings in person are surrounded by various committee meetings that also happen quarterly. Those are very specifically paced because they're usually connected to when you close your books for the previous quarter. when your numbers are going to get published for that quarter and your 10Q, what your earnings call, when your earnings call is going to be. So you're going to surround that around the CFO's schedule for the most part. And so if you sit on 3 or 4 public companies, and if you think about everyone's Q is due around the same time, and everyone's going to be having their earnings released at around the same time, now you got to think about, did I just join 4 boards and they all have their quarterly board meeting on the same week, and then you can't do it,
Yeah.
Or if you're doing that, can you coordinate effectively with the general counsel to make sure that, okay, this is Monday, Tuesday of this week, and this next one is Wednesday, Thursday of this week, and then that's it, right? So that's part of what you have to do is be aware of your calendar and make sure that you're going to show up to those meetings, because you can't miss meetings when you sit on a board.
Yeah.
Once in a while, because you've got something imperative, but you probably should never miss more than just 1 meeting at the most. You have to attend all of the meetings. And if we see board members that are constantly missing meetings or joining late, or they have to join by phone because they're not going to be able to make the in-person, you start to take a hard look and say, they shouldn't be on this board. They don't have time, or they're not managing their calendar very well. Because in addition to that, you have monthly meetings that are usually by Zoom. And those are committee and board meetings. And then sometimes you're in the middle of something significant that, maybe a crisis happens, or you're acquiring something, or you're selling something, and now all bets are off. Now you're going to have meetings all the time. So that's one thing you need to do, is just be present. But you also need to belong to at least one of the usually 3 committees. So there's an audit committee, works closely with the CFO.
So every board has multiple committees. You should also have a relationship with those committees.
You have to sit on at least one committee. They're never going to let you join a board and you're not going to have a committee membership. And they probably recruited you to the board in part because of your expertise in respect of one of the committees.
Makes sense.
So there's audit, which again is, I usually sit on audit. This is people with financial expertise. We understand how to work with the CFO. We understand the levers you have to push and pull in order to get to the right EBITDA and hit your projected numbers every quarter, whatever, okay? That's audit. So think numbers, but also think managing risk. So audit also keeps track of preempting crisis, preempting risk. If there is a crisis, how do we address this? Those things are going to come to audit first. And then there's NomGov, nominating and corporate governance, which has a lot to do with succession planning, because the main job of the board is to hire and fire the CEO. That's our 1 through 10 job, is to hire and fire the CEO. So that happens first in NomGov and then branches out to the rest of the board. And we also just look at the governance practices of the board. Are we holding the right number of meetings? Are we minuting the meetings right? Are we paying attention to the right issues? We're also looking at what should the company be addressing in terms of like cyber or, other big timely issues, diversity, environmental and sustainability, that kind of stuff. So we take a hard look at, is the board paying attention to what it needs to be paying attention to? And then finally, and so I sit on those 2 boards mostly, NomGov and audit. The board I sit on the least is the board I have the committee I sit on the least is compensation. Yeah. I just didn't deal a lot with comp in my career before all of this. I've received comp. I understand how comp packages work. I do sit on comp on a few of my boards, but it's not a committee that I normally sit on. And that's just, again, figuring out what the comp packages look like. Dollars are usually easy.
Yeah.
It's what do the equity packages look like? And what kind of equity is going to be comprised in that package? Is it restricted stock units? Is it options? Is it, profit interest? Is it phantom stock? So that, and understanding what the levels look like. Is everybody being paid at the same level at each stratosphere of the company? What do the salary bands look like?
Yeah.
How does that play into our recruiting efforts? So are we paying people right in order to hire them, in order to attract them to the company and then retain them? How do we need to ratchet those numbers down to the extent that we don't want to have a RIF, but we need to start saving some money? How do you determine all of that? So it's comp. So those are the 3 typical committees, and then you'll put other committees together depending on what's happening. If the company looks like it's going to file for bankruptcy, you put a special committee together. If the company looks like it's going to sell, you put a special committee together. So,
and that special committee is outside, or does it come?
Those are board members.
Okay, those are also board members.
It's just board members, but those are board members ripped from the other committees, still on those committees, but they have special expertise.
Like a task force.
Almost. Yeah, task force.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's like a task force.
See, you should go sit on a board.
Well, that's my other question, right? So, when someone's starting when there's a brand new company, right? Like brand new company, a startup or whatever the case may be. When is a good time for them to start forming the board? Do they do that right away? Do they kind of like peg it and they wait for some milestones and then start putting it together? What does that look like for startups?
For me, I always advise you put your board together right away, but you need those people at the beginning to understand, well, I'm not paying you a cash compensation because I can't afford to pay board members in cash right at the beginning.
Yeah.
You don't have the financing for that, so you can offer them equity. And then again, their interests are aligned in terms of growing the company big enough so that their equity means something. And then you can also pay them in cash, right? So so to the extent you can do that and you feel comfortable dribbling out some equity, so call it less than 1% overall to all of your board members in total, probably less than 0.5%, just enough to kind of wet their whistle. And then you promise them reoccurring packages every couple of years or whatever. And you're on a vesting schedule with them and everything. So they don't just right away have equity and they can leave, But if you can do that with some quality people, it's the cheapest way to get great advice. So you're not paying a consultant, you're not paying an outside advisor that you normally would have to. You get all this great expertise and advice essentially for free or for super cheap from people that are required to meet with you on a regular basis, at least every quarter. So for me, if I was an entrepreneur and I was putting a startup together, right away I'd want to put people on my board. You might rejigger the board at some point because you might have people that are incredible, but later on you can get more incredible people. Or you might put people on your board now that you thought you needed, but you actually need a different area of expertise and you want to move them off to allow room for somebody else. Or somebody just might get tired with they're fatigued, and they're just not giving you the value you wanted anymore. But at least comprising that early group of people, that's going to give you such a leg up versus having to pay outside advisors to come in and do the work. Plus, board members have fiduciary duties that are owed to the shareholders. You're going to probably be the biggest shareholder of the company at that point, so they actually owe you a duty. So it's not just like advisors or an advisory board.
They have to put in the work.
They have to put in the work.
They got to put in the work.
They have to roll up their sleeves.
Yeah.
If you can't do it then, and then look, the first time you're going to take institutional investment, so it's not just friends and family, it's not an angel investor. The first time you take true outside institutional money, call it VC money, they're going to always demand that you probably put additionally 2 members on the board. And those people are probably going to be designated, they are going to be designated by that VC or by whoever the lead investors were in that round. So they're each going to get
their investment as well.
They want to protect their investment. Yeah. And so at that point, you'll have a lot of input because they want you to be happy as the founder. VCs like founders to be happy. But it's not always going to be totally within your control. So it's good to have already some board members on, because you're going to get probably 2 additional people. And then it goes from there. You get private equity. They're going to totally redo the board. I mean, by the time you sell the company or go public, your board might have a historical vestige or 2, but for the most part, it's a bunch of designees. Yeah. And so that's good because they'll pick the right people as the company is growing and developing and has different needs. But it's not always going to be people that you've had in your network all your life that you trust. So it's push and pull. But I mean, in short, I would say assemble your board as quickly as possible if you can. I hate advisory boards. I don't think they work.
So you want your board, but you're saying not an advisory board, not from like outside?
This is controversial. So anybody, you guys want to reach out to me and argue with me about this, I'll argue I like to argue. So I'll do it. I used to think advisory boards were the way to go, because you don't pay them anything. You don't generally give them equity, and they're just kind of there. They paratrooper in when you need them. You call them for help, and otherwise they're sort of out there doing their thing. They have great networks. Sometimes they can bring in money for you and all of that. But again, they don't owe a duty to you, and there really is no established pace out there in the world for having advisory board meetings. So you can't rely on them being there for you at least every quarter. You can try. That's not what advisory boards sign up for.
Yeah.
Advisory board members don't really think there's going to be any of that at all. And they know they're not getting paid. And they know they're probably not going to drop onto your real board. So
they don't have no incentive.
They have no incentive. So they'll answer your call when you call them, but they're more like, it's a fancy word for saying a bunch of mentors. You can have that anyways.
Yeah,
and then things get murky later on. People always wonder, well, how do you, what's the synergy between the advisory board and ultimately the board you put together? And is there some saltiness over here with the advisory board because they didn't get dropped into the real board? And I just don't, it's messy for me, and I don't think it works.
I just felt like I wanted to switch up the frame a little bit because I think you look great. I think I was just a little a little washed out because I had black on and I was kind of going against the sun. But I mean, it's about you, so it all worked out. So we're talking about
Thank
boards.
you for the good lighting. Thank you.
You know, like the governing board, the advisory boards. I'll talk to you about like when should startups think about positioning their board. What are the most important seats on the board? Like okay, I got a brand new startup, excited about it.
Yeah.
Got some potential. It makes sense. Like it's a great idea. What type of people are sitting on my board?
Yeah.
Who am I looking to get?
You should always think about who are the key people in your management team that you either have or you want to have. Those sorts of people are the same kinds of people you also want on your board. The difference being the board person, you either can't afford to bring them on as an executive.
Okay.
Okay. Or they're just beyond that, right? They're just past that in their career. They're retired. They're just sitting on boards now for a living, so you can't hide. They're not even available to be an executive. But so it depends, right? So from company to company, if you're a tech company, you're a tech startup, and your management team is you, and you've got this great idea, but then your most important person after you is your CTO or your CIO, your chief technology officer or your chief information officer.
Yeah, I need that right now.
Okay, well, you guys all heard he's looking to hire.
I need a CTO, let's go.
Help wanted. I am not the woman for you, I am not. I'm a tech Luddite, but okay. But so if that's the second most important person after you on your management team, then you know that somebody or a couple of somebodies on your board should have deep tech, right?
Okay, yeah.
If the most important person after you on your in your management team, let's say you're starting a tech sort of, but it's mostly a retail company. So it's a D2C retail company. You're going to be selling stuff, whether it's apparel or CPG, consumer product goods, or whatever it is. So the most important person in your management team is call it your CMO, your chief marketing officer. People used to call it your chief digital officer or whatever, but it's a person who has to understand both brand marketing and also performance marketing.
So I got me.
Then you know that
I got the tech person.
Yeah.
And now I got the marketing person.
Let's say that's an important person for you on your management team. You need somebody on your board who reflects deep understanding of state-of-the-art marketing technology. Okay. But on the flip side, if the most important person on your management team is a person who is in the schmata business, like who understands apparel and how to manufacture things and where to manufacture things, distribution and warehousing of apparel, then you probably want somebody on your board that reflects that sort of knowledge. So first and foremost in figuring out who to put on your board is figuring out what's important to your company generally, because of the industry, because of what your company actually does, because of what underlies your company, the things that have to happen in order to make your company tick, and think about trying to get people that can do that stuff on your board. Then you want to think about, as you continue to build your board, so this is a little bit further down the line, who are the people that I want on my board to be watching for the stuff that's not core to my business, but it's core to the business being able to grow and succeed. So you're always going to want somebody who's aware of cyber risk. Generally, okay? Generally, regardless what your company does. You're going to want somebody who, this is actually really important, you're going to want somebody who understands how to take a company through an investor round, how to grow a company to beautify it to go to market, how to sell a company, or how to take a company public, depending on what the path is. None of that has anything to do with the business and operations of your company.
Facts, yeah.
Right? So, but what that has to do with is the liquidity path of your company. So you're always going to be wanting to think about that.
What's up, y'all? So I want to take a second to speak to my creators. So whether you currently got a podcast or think about launching a podcast, maybe you got a YouTube channel and you think about launching a YouTube channel. Here are the facts. Did you know that 9 out of 10 creators actually quit because they don't have anyone to hold them accountable? That's why all you need to do, right? Click that link below, join my Action Takers community, because not only are we going to hold you accountable, we're going to teach you how to execute at a higher level. Plus, give you access to principles and strategies to grow your mindset and generate more revenue. So what are you waiting for? Click that link below and join one of the fastest growing content and accountability communities. All right, I'll see you on the inside. So the book I was talking about was Built to Sell by John Warrillow.
Okay.
Have you read that book?
No, I haven't.
basically, and I read it a while ago, but basically it just talks about when you're building and conceiving a company, to build it to be sellable from the start.
Yeah, that's
So
right.
I think when we have mentioned that in terms of like who you're choosing, the most important people, and then you obviously mentioned having people that are on a board that are not tech, that are not
Yep.
marketing, but are building the company up or adding to the company so that it can be potentially, if you want to take it public,
Yeah,
or if you want to raise funds.
that's right. Because remember, taking a company public is selling the company.
Mm.
It's taking on capital investments, right? But you are selling massive, massive chunks of that company. So you're still selling it to somebody, basically, even though it's really more of a raise. So either way, you're selling. You're right. You always want to, you don't immediately have to have somebody on your board that has that expertise, but at some point and pretty quickly, you're going to want people on there who understand how rounds work and how M&A works and how IPOs work, because they're always going to be positioning the company properly for that stuff. So, and then as you get further on, once you're public or whatever it is, you want governance people so they don't get sued for stupid foot faults on the government, side. You for sure, this sort of answers your question, but sort of not. You for sure will always want, let me back up. I for sure always care about diversity on my boards. Not just diversity of thought, because a lot of idiots say diversity of thought, and okay, fine, yes, that's what it ultimately is, but that's not that's a real cop-out, and that's a way of not having actual gender, age, and racial diversity on your board, So there have been some legislation that's been passed and then challenged in the various state Supreme Courts that has required gender and racial diversity at the very least on boards. So you may have heard about it in California. We had legislation that required boards of companies of certain sizes to have at least 2 women on every board.
Yeah.
That's being challenged right now in the courts, and we'll just, anyways, it's winding its way through. But putting aside whether that legislation makes it or doesn't make it, there's Goldman Sachs, for example, won't invest in companies that don't have certain numbers when it comes to diversity on their boards. They just won't do it. There's certain companies that won't partner with your company unless you have that diversity of your board. So it just, even if you're looking at it from a purely Machiavellian perspective, it just makes pure sense to have diversity on your board, even if it's purely Machiavellian, notwithstanding that we all know it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, facts.
And then you look at your customer base, and everything is so transparent these days. Your customers can easily see who's on your board. Even if you're not public, there's ways they can figure that out.
Yeah.
And if you are going to a diverse customer base, you think they're going to take kindly to the fact that your entire board is pale, male, and stale?
Pale, male, and stale.
By the way, I stole that from my friend Laurel, who's the CEO of a big branding company called Elevate Your Brand. So shout out to Laurel. But I kind of love that phrase.
That's
and it
pretty
fits.
funny.
It totally fits. Yeah.
Definitely. So I think what's interesting is now, right, there's a whole big market like information. So there's so many information businesses out there, right? So you could learn something, you could be a specialist, an expert in some type of information, assimilate that, and then repackage that and then sell it out. How do you find that building a company that way works with someone that has an info product? Should they still look to put a board together for that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting question, because that's, for sure, it's a company, right?
Definitely,
but it's a service provider. You'd still want to build that company in the same way, but for sure, that's much more about, you look at that movie Social Network, right? About how Facebook originally came to be, you know, and you think about all those guys, it was just a bunch of engineers sitting in a house somewhere, wired in or plugged in, whatever that phrase was, and they're all just banging away at their keyboard,
Coding. They was coding. They was coding crazy.
Right. So, I mean, companies come together and evolve in all sorts of different ways. So, I mean, for sure, if you've got a product that is really tech-based or information dissemination-based, or if it's media-based, even media is actually a really good example.
Yeah. That's actually what I'm focused on right now.
Yeah. So media is different. So now you're really talking about a bunch of content creators, not visual content, but, written content or audio content, who just need to bang away at their keyboards all day long. Like the people that put Medium together, for example, amalgamating authors and then providing a platform for them to disseminate their work in a way that they may not have had before Medium, right?
Yeah.
So, and so those companies you're right. They definitely come together differently because there it's much more about the people in front of their computer screens and less about, we're going to have big meetings because we have product development and product rollout and marketing, and we have big events and we have influencers. And so you're right, it'll happen a little differently, but eventually every company
should have that.
Eventually every company gets to the structure. Meta is no different. We were talking about Facebook, Meta, whatever you want to call it, is no different. Eventually they got to a place where they needed a board and they have investors and they have a whole stratosphere of employees and they have a whole organization, And
is that something that like, if a company's been operating without that, let's say for a couple of years or whatever the case may be, how fast could they put something like that together?
You'd need an outside advisor to help with that, because once you're kind of set in your ways and you're rolling along, there's probably a lot of things that have happened along the way that aren't too good.
Yeah.
There's culture things that have happened that you're not going to be able to fix on your own. You lack in all of that HR structure. I'm going to focus on that for a minute because that's where most of the big snafus happen. You haven't organized your company in a way like where you have proper salary bands.
Yeah.
And everybody at this level has an SVP title and everybody down here has a director title and they get paid in very specific bands. And there's performance evaluations every year. And, there's basic meat and potato corporate America shit like that if you've been running for a few years, you probably don't have, and you probably don't have the expertise to make.
Yeah.
So you probably hire somebody on the outside to put all that in. Is it difficult?
What is that person's, what's that person's title?
So that person is probably going to be an employee benefits advisor.
Okay.
And that's like a Pearl Meyer. Now that's a really big company that not all of us are going to be able to afford, but something like that. So benefits advisor. Eventually, that person gets supplanted by what you'd call a CHRO, a Chief Human Resources Officer, or an SVP of HR, whatever it is. That person should always directly report to the CEO because all the problems come to them and you want them to have a direct line to the power central, to get things fixed so you don't end up with a Harvey Weinstein kind of situation before it's too late. So eventually that person turns into the CHRO, but you probably haven't paid for somebody to come in and run your HR yet, at the point you're looking at. You ask, is it hard? Does it take a long time to get into that practice or to become more organized? It depends. If everybody really wants it and everyone's rowing in the same direction, you can get it done within 6 months to a year. You can get all of that stuff put in place and then you just tweak from there. If there are people who are objecting to that and pushing against it, a lot of times the founder CEOs don't want that because they feel like it destroys the authenticity or the organic DNA of the company. They want everyone to just be cool and vibey like they always were. And, a lot of times founders don't want to put structure around things because they feel like that kills the creativity.
Yeah.
Then you're in for an uphill battle, But eventually any company that's going to succeed is going to develop some kind of structure like that because there's no investor out there in the world that just willy-nilly invests in some. They'll do it the first time, but they won't go in for the big money for the second round.
You need that structure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what are some of the ways that you've taken some imperfect action in your career? Was it like through pivoting? Was it through just making a hard decision? Like what sticks out in your mind as like one of those
like
moments?
A mistake that I made?
Possibly.
Yeah.
Possibly. If the mistake that you made came from you just taking some imperfect action. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, for sure. I mean, the biggest one that always sticks out for me, although it turned out great, but at the time it wasn't good at all. So we talked earlier, I'm a recovering lawyer. So I was a partner at a big law firm called Jones Day.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point it came, I started thinking I felt like there were some limits for me at the firm, and I decided to lateral to a different firm. I felt like I might have more opportunities at a different firm that didn't compete with Jones Day. So it was different in size, it was different in geographical reach, it was different in footprint, it was different in practice area, it was just differently structured altogether. So it wasn't like I was going from competitor to competitor. And it was all very friendly, and I lateraled over to this other firm because I felt like the right practice groups were there, I felt like the right network was there, I felt like my rate was going to be more reasonable, so I could be more flexible with my rate and take on different clients than what I was taking on at my other firm. What I didn't and all that was true. I was right about that because I'm really good at diligencing the business shit. What I used to forget about a lot, and I don't forget about it as much anymore, but I come from a different generation where this word didn't matter. Culture, in the sense of what are the people like that are there? Will I be happy?
Oh, yeah.
Will I develop social friends? Is like, will I develop a social network?
Yeah.
That's what I mean by that. Like the culture of the place. What are the people like?
Yeah. What's that environment
What's
feel like?
the environment feel like?
Yeah.
I didn't have the luxury of caring about that as much when I was coming up. I'm 50. And when we came
No
up,
way. No way.
I am.
Get out of
And
here.
I just have really good lighting today.
Ah.
But being that age, I came up, you know, we were scrappy. We had to be. We were coming out of the 80s where there wasn't, you know, there was massive recession happening in the country. And you couldn't care about that stuff. You needed to care about where can I go, have the biggest paycheck possible, the biggest potential for a paycheck, and I'm just going to grind my ass to the top, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just going to make it till I'm 65 and I retire with the gold watch. And it's traditional corporate America, and that's the ladder I'm climbing. And I don't care who does what. I've had staplers thrown at me. I've had, I've had everything you can imagine that people would never stand for today. But you just grind your way through it. So when I was diligencing the firm I went to, I just looked at, is this going to be good for my practice?
Yeah.
And realized that the culture wasn't right for me. But I realized it the minute I stepped into the firm, holy shit, I've made a mistake. But I'm here now. I undid my whole life.
Yeah.
And I'm here now. Yeah. And I overcorrected. I think I did fine, and I don't judge myself for the overcorrection. But I overcorrected by shifting my practice. I was doing M&A. I decided that I was going to focus a lot on the Asian-based M&A in the renewable energy sector, because that's where all like the turbine manufacturers are and everything. They were creating the wind farms and all the solar. So all the manufacturers were there for that. And I teamed up with a partner in my New York office, and we just hit the road. Because for me, being out of my local office helped me feel better about the firm I was at, because I didn't have to deal with some of the culture issues I was dealing with.
Yeah.
I have 2 kids. That wasn't so good for them, you know?
Yeah, you being on the road. Yeah.
I was on the road a lot, you know. Maybe it toughened them up. Maybe that gave them a good image, another image of what, professional life can look like. And they've seen a lot of different iterations of it from me over the years, for sure. I'm a single mother, so I've been what they've looked to see, what is it that you want to be, But not good not to be around your kids so much, So I came in off the road after about 2 years, and I was going to go back to my old firm, and I was happy to do it. It was what it was. I love my firm. I was actually really excited to get back there. And it was in that moment, that interim little month-long period, when I had decided to go back to Jones Day. But before I left the firm I was at, when I got the call from American Apparel, from the chair, who's now my mentor, Colleen Brown. And she called me and said, I was referred to you by such and such and such. And she had come to me through various conversations. She said, we are looking to recruit a whole new C-suite. First position we want to fill is the general counsel position. I've heard from Jonathan Anshell, who's the general counsel at CBS Corp, who had been my client for years. I represented CBS for years. She also knew him. She said, I've heard from Jonathan Anshell. You're somebody we should be talking to. I'm going to cut your compensation in half because we're in a liquidity crisis. I'm going to give you a great equity package, though. You can become wealthy off of this equity package if we make it work here. Plus, you're from Los Angeles. This is all made in and around downtown Los Angeles. We have 10,000 employees. 7,500 of those employees are manufacturing workers that are all immigrants, mostly from Latin America, somewhere in Mexico. And their jobs will be, if this company fails, the barriers to entry for another company like this are so high. Those jobs will never be recreated, and they will all be unemployed. And I know, as a Los Angeles girl, you don't want to see those jobs go away.
That's hard to turn down.
Real hard.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right. And she caught me in that vulnerable period of, I'm a little unsure because I made a mistake in my career. I haven't yet gone back to the place I was before. It always feels rotten having to go back somewhere in that kind of a circumstance, And she just got me. So I said yes to that.
So you took a pay cut initially.
A massive pay cut.
Because I want people to understand that. You
Massive.
took a pay cut.
50% in my cash comp, sliced in half.
Yeah.
And
But with an
equity package, with an equity package, best career decision I've ever made. so it came out of the ashes of this mistake. But going to American Apparel as the general counsel, 1 year later, I was the CEO of American Apparel. 1 year later. And it goes from there. I successfully sold it. Then I was the CEO of True Religion, and on and on and on. And it just feathered my nest for everything else. If I had not made that mistake and pivoted and remained vulnerable and open to other things and new things, I would never be where I am right now.
So you was moving.
Yeah.
You was on the move.
Right.
So you took that on purpose. So you was moving. A lot of people get paralyzed by the movement.
Right.
They want it to be
You
perfect.
got to keep moving.
And a lot of people probably, go ahead.
Do you ever see that movie with Brad Pitt, World War Z?
No, I haven't seen that one. Is that worth seeing?
Everyone, we're shooting this on a Friday. Everyone, if you're watching this on a Friday tonight, just pull it up.
Isn't it long?
It's real long, and you should get the director's cut.
Oh, okay. All right.
Get the director's cut. It's a very scary movie that's based on a really good book that you should also read. But anyway, it's called World War Z. And in the middle of it, I don't think there's any secret. It's a zombie movie, essentially. Yeah. But in the middle of it, there's this whole philosophical conversation about movement is life. You just stay on the move. Like the way people get caught in a crisis anywhere is they stop moving and they just shelter in place.
Yeah.
Don't shelter in place. If you hit a crisis, keep putting one foot in front of the other.
So this is basically Newton's law of motion, right? An object at rest remains at rest. An object in motion remains in motion. At constant speed, in a straight line unless it's acted upon by unbalanced force.
There it is.
So you got to keep moving.
Activity, baby.
Activity.
Yeah.
So, so again, like one of the main reasons why I wanted to connect with you and bring you on the show is because, you've told me like small little pieces of the story, but I haven't like heard the whole thing put together. And I think it's it's a really dope story, especially at this point in your career where you're doing other things.
Yeah.
And I don't know like if people, maybe a small percentage of people understand how boards move and how you can occupy multiple seats. But I don't think there's a lot of, at least people now that are like, everyone's thinking about entrepreneurship, making money fast. Like,
I hate that.
I'm going to start this Amazon business and going to go crazy. I'm going to do this is going to go crazy. I need to be a millionaire in 6 months. But to really like sit back like, okay.
By the way, being a millionaire is not it.
It's not.
You have to have multi-millions these days.
No, definitely.
And billionaire should be the goal. But anyways, not to interrupt you.
No, 100%.
Okay.
And I'm very happy that you said that because they're saying like, having $1 million is not the same as having it before. And then just getting that is fine. But like you said, multi-millions and obviously getting to billions or whatever the goal is. But sitting at the multiple seats and having positions in multiple boards, I think is definitely something that people can aspire to. And you obviously giving it more context is great. What are some maybe some books that stand out in your mind to kind of get people mind moving in a direction like that?
Putting aside what you think of this particular person, Elon Musk, Ashley Vance wrote a very wonderful biography of Elon Musk and put it out a few years ago. So it actually doesn't bring us forward to the Twitter wars or, all of that, right? So it's a little before that. It does talk about Tesla and SpaceX and even a little bit about the Boring Company, which is his tunneling company, which I think is actually one of his most genius things to this day, especially for LA. And so interesting when you consider it's in an earthquake environment. And just like the whole thing is so fascinating to me. But it's just called Elon Musk, and it's Ashley Vance's biography of him. It is, you want to talk about being a puddle on the floor and picking yourself up and pouring yourself back into the glass. This man has done that many times. It's not like he just had some easy path on the way up. And they go back into the PayPal days, and a lot of people don't even remember that and all of that. So that's actually a fascinating book about, what's your path, and then also not resting on your laurels. So he had that exit. What did he do with all of that? He took that entire pile of cash
and then reinvested it.
And reinvested the whole thing. He's made and lost fortunes over and over and over again. So this is a man you can never count out. Whether you like him or don't, whether you like his politics or don't. I'm a liberal Democrat, so you could just read the tea leaves there. But whether you think it's smart or not smart to do some of the things he does socially, whether you approve of the rest of it, Never count this man out because he's lost and gained more
Multiple
than a
times.
lot of other people on this planet. And arguably, he's one of the iconic CEOs of our lifetime because of how he's built his companies and then run them and run multiple companies and how he's put his boards together. There's a book called Who is Michael Ovitz?
Who is Michael Ovitz?
Who is Michael Ovitz? So
Okay.
Michael Ovitz was an icon and remains an icon, but he cut his teeth in the entertainment industry and he put together what ultimately became one of the biggest and most successful talent agencies of our lifetime, of this era, of any era. So I think some of those agencies there's a lot of consolidation now, so times are changing even in that industry. And he went on to actually be the CEO of Disney for a minute, a notoriously failed attempt. Whether or not because of his performance or just bad social stuff behind the scenes, I leave it for you guys to be the judge. He ultimately married Tamara Mellon later in life. She was the founder of Jimmy Choo, and she now has her own eponymous shoe brand called Tamara Mellon. And he's now an investor at large, and so he's out there putting his money to work. But listen, he's another one. He's spiky, he's got claws and fangs, and he's, he in the book, he himself, and it's written from an autobiographical perspective, he admits that he is not the easiest to get along with, and he's got a big ego, and it's, but he talks a lot about taking that ego off the table when it's time to get business done, and what you need to do in order to get to yes in a negotiation, and also about what you do when you have a failure and how do you pull yourself back up, because he himself has lived 9 lives, just like Elon Musk, So that's another really good one. And then third, because you're testing an old lady's memory, okay? 'Cause I didn't know you were going to ask me about books, but I do happen to also...
You got to turn the pages.
I sit on the board of directors for the English Lit department at UCLA, so I do read a lot. So I always will have a book recommendation. But the third book I would recommend, and I think everyone hopefully at least has heard of this book, is Shoe Dog.
Yeah, I read that.
The Phil Knight book.
Yep.
So you know all the reasons why that's a great book and why you'd recommend it. And that book only goes up to basically the IPO, but talks about, just the interesting conversation about supply chain and manufacturing and about repatriating cash and getting things distributed correctly. And then what about when you have scandal in terms of, okay, you're making some shit offshore, but you can't always be in the factory, so you don't really know what the practices are and someone calls you on it, a la Apple and their whole big problem. So that book, I guess you can see a theme here. I like to read books about and by people who have troughs and mountains, because I like to see how people deal with crisis and come back, What I don't like are people who just zhuzh along flat like this all the time and don't have spectacular losses, because then their wins are never that spectacular to me. If you're just mushing along flat like a juggernaut at glacial pace, I don't care what you're saying you're going to do. I don't care what you said you did. If you haven't had spectacular loss, you haven't had spectacular win, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And you're boring to me, and don't tell me what you're going to do. Just do it and then tell me about it later on, because I like the lessons learned and I like to hear about it, in retrospect. And don't keep doing things, for years. A year. Give everything a year. But don't do something for more than a year that isn't moving the needle.
Yeah, that's facts.
Okay? That is the definition of insanity. So don't keep doing it. And please, people, and you and I actually kind of touched on this a little bit before we started shooting today. Don't do anything that you're not getting paid for. You think it's a loss leader? I no longer believe in loss leaders. I actually used to believe in loss leaders, and I no longer do. The idea of doing something and building up capital with somebody and eventually they're going to pay you for it, or eventually someone's going to spot you from the wilderness and they're going to pay you for it, that doesn't happen. It happens once in a blue moon. It generally is not your good business model.
The offer that you don't make is an offer that you can't take. 100%.
Right, 100%. So charge for everything. And if somebody doesn't want to pay you, let them know. They can come back when they can pay you or when they want to pay you, and it's what it is. Obviously, there's some exceptions. If Phil Knight walks in here right now, and you have a clothing brand, and he says, I want to give me 100 things for free because I want to see how they go in the Nike store, you're probably going to do that, So make your judgment as these things come along. But for the most part, don't be out there doing shit every weekend for free. Don't be out there just distributing your content for free. Don't be out there giving energy of yourself and giving pieces of yourself out there for free and taking away from what should be core in your life for free, which is family, health, friends, alone time, whatever you do, your meditation, your fitness practice, whatever that is. That's the stuff that you're either paying to do or you're doing for free. Everything else you should be getting paid to do.
Yeah. And when people say it ain't about the money, I think it should be about the money.
It is about the
money. It should never not be about the money.
If you're not, I mean, unless you're a monk or whatever, that's not your thing and you don't really care. And this isn't about money for material stuff. It's money so that you can be a part of the world economy. If you're not a player in the world economy and the national economy and your state economy and your city economy and your local neighborhood economy, then you're like, what are we doing? What are we talking about here? What's the change you're going to be able to affect? Because at the end of the day, we're all just trying to make this world a better place. And if you aren't in the economy,
you can't do that.
Yeah. There's only so much of you. You're one person. You've got 24 hours in the day and you have to sleep once in a while. So you can't volunteer constantly.
That's facts.
Okay.
That's facts. And podcasters, how would you like to make 5 or 6 figures with your podcast? Did you know that most podcasters do not make any revenue? It's because they think they need brand deals, sponsorships, and a large audience to monetize your show. But what if I told you you don't need none of that? There's a simple 4-step framework to position your show to be monetized. And I can give it a game completely for free. All you need to do is head over to podcast2profits.live and I'll see you in this exclusive training. I'm gonna give you all the game. What are you waiting for? Head over to the training, let's go. So I got a couple more questions for you and then I'm gonna let you jump in the pool or whatever you wanna do.
I mostly am a spa girl, but yes, maybe the pool.
All right, what's one time that you had to think extremely big? Like extremely big.
That I had to think big?
Yeah.
So I think maybe the best example is when I took over the reins at American Apparel. And we had been taken private by Goldman Sachs and a couple of other big hedge funds, Monarch and Pentwater and a couple of others. And I was given a budget to implement some of my strategic initiatives 100% and to lay what we call breadcrumbs out with the other ones, meaning you partially implement your initiative and partially you leave it unimplemented because you're looking for a buyer to come in and you can say to them, here's what I've done to make the company more gorgeous for you. So this is turnkey for you. You don't have to do anything. Here's some things that I've done sort of. And if you have $50 extra million that you can invest in this area, here's what it's going to be. So a breadcrumb, right?
Yeah.
You're leading them to the magic house with the cookies and the candy. Okay, so I had to kind of really quickly figure out what was I going to complete and what was I going to leave as a breadcrumb. And at the time, I made a big, really risky decision that ended up dividending out for me in huge, huge ways. So this was sort of in the beginning of the middle of e-com as a way of life for retailers. So true D2C, not brick and mortar.
Yeah.
And with that, marketing technologies, what we call digital marketing or performance marketing, right? Which depends, those two things are symbiotic always, as you know.
Yeah.
If you don't have a healthy website, e-com site, then no amount of digital marketing is going to do jack diddly shit for you. And vice versa, you can have a website and it's like the tree that fell in the forest and nobody was there to hear it. If you don't have great digital marketing, then what do you have that e-com site for, right?
Yeah.
So these things have to work in symbiosis. And I decided to put most of my eggs in that basket and shift a lot from our brick and mortar locations. I ripped my website down to the studs and paid a lot of money to rebuild it. I started focusing a lot on performance marketing versus the brand marketing we had normally focused on, a lot of influencer stuff and all the content and the pretty billboards and everything you knew about American Apparel, And I decided to weaponize all of that content with digital marketing, which at the time was really new.
Yeah, it was super new.
Super new. And nobody really understood that actually this was the answer for marketers. Because previously, marketers, you look at them and it's like, oh, that's art. We don't really know. Your dollar's out. We don't know how that translates to dollars coming back in. So we're not really going to take it seriously. And the very first thing we're going to cut every time is going to be marketing because we don't understand how it ties to revenue. And as a matter of fact, marketers used to not even take responsibility for revenue generation. Now, today, that's unheard of. Yeah. Anybody who lives today knows we tie them to the chief revenue officer and they sit next to each other physically or virtually, okay? But at the time, this wasn't the case. So I did that and I built up this beautiful website and built up this beautiful digital marketing platform to sustain it. I was like one of the first people to hire a chief digital officer, which nobody had at the time, and he was amazing. When we went out to sell that company, we went out to a bunch of, we ran an auction, and Gildan, big public apparel wholesale company, came to us, apparel wholesale company. They had never had a D2C business ever.
Oh, wow.
They had never had an e-com site that was D2C, B2B for sure, because they were wholesalers, but not D2C. When they came around looking at us and they said, here's what we're going to pay. We only want your wholesale business. American Apparel, we also had a big wholesale business. We only want, and that was a cash cow for us. They said, we only want your wholesale business. We don't really know about all this retail shit. We don't want your brick and mortar. We don't want to, we don't have actual, consumers out there. We have businesses that are our customers. So leave all that. You can spin it all off or whatever, but we're certainly not going to buy it. We're not going to pay extra for it either. And I asked if I could showcase in a few management presentations what we had done with at least the website. I knew they'd never buy the brick and mortar. And they saw such a gleaming, gorgeous, brand new, beautifully cut diamond and saw the potential behind all the marketing, the digital marketing behind it, that for the first time ever in the history of that company, they bought not just our wholesale business, they bought a D2C e-com based business with all the performance marketing technologies. They bought that whole team from us too. They moved over that whole team of people as well. Only time in the history of Gildan that they've ever done that, and they paid extra for it. So I totally changed the path. I'm not going to say I had a whole team with me, of course, my chief merchant, Sylvia Monticelli, my CDO, my CMO, everybody. We changed the course of that sale. And that's why I ended up having such a good relationship with my owners in the end, and how I got to True Religion, because like we talked about earlier, they own True Religion as well. That was such a remarkable sale because of what we had done for 2 years before that sale. Talk about planting seeds, that it ended up being something huge. I think that answers your question, right?
No, that was big.
Okay.
That answers it.
So
That's answered.
Yeah.
So
Anyways.
Last question for you is, we got the Chelsea Grayson School, Chelsea Grayson Academy.
Yeah.
What are the 4 things that students coming to your school have to learn? They can't graduate without these 4 pillars.
Figure out if you're a leader or follower. If you're a follower, I can't help you. And that's in no judgment. You have to want to be a leader if we're going to work effectively together. Because most of my lessons are about effective leadership. And not everybody can be a leader. And it's no judgment. And some people are just going to be those people that are plugged in, all that, like we talked about earlier, and they want to be at their computer screen, and that's fine. And they want somebody to assign something for them to do, and they don't want to take a lot of initiative because that's just not their thing. They want to do other stuff. They look forward to their weekends or whatever it is. And we need those people for sure, but those aren't the people that I'm going to mentor. So figure out if you want to lead or not lead, for one thing.
So leadership.
Yeah. For another thing is, understand that a lot of what I'm going to talk to you about and a lot of what you're going to need to perfect and continue to hone throughout the course of your career and your relationship with me is communication skills.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Just learn how to, with whatever audience that you need to touch, learn how to regularly, transparently, authentically, and in robust fashion, communicate. You're never going to survive in this world, whether it's in traditional corporate America at somebody else's company, whether it's at your own company that you're starting, whether it's with your family, whether it's with your friends, whether it's with your partner, whoever that might be. You'll never get anything accomplished unless you continue to hone your communication skills. And I think third, please do, and this goes back to something we talked about earlier, please do understand that we're going to hit crisis. You're going to hit crisis.
So risk management?
Risk, yeah. Risk. So risk preemption for sure.
Okay, yeah.
And then risk management, to your point, right? So some risk is going to happen to you even if you were able to preempt it to a certain extent. So cyber is actually a perfect example of that, where most companies these days are really smart with cyber, and you have your cyber team and you have cyber audit from the outside, and you're constantly have people looking and seeing what the attacks are, but you're not going to be able to prevent everything, right?
Yeah.
So when it happens, what's your plan? How do you keep your head on your shoulders, screwed on straight? Can you keep your powder dry? And can you not come to me and say, I'm in a crisis and I don't know what to do and you need to give me advice and da-da-da. It's more like, come to me and say, here's the crisis. Here, I've got 3 different ways that we could fix this. And, pick one. Here's a cafeteria plan. Pick one or whatever. And by the way, that pick one also relates back to number 1, which is sometimes you're going to have to come up with 3 plans and ask your leader to pick one, and they're going to make a decision. And sometimes you're going to be the leader and somebody's going to look to you to make that decision.
That's facts.
And in that case, it's great to take guidance and advice from your circle of counselors. But in the end, you need to make that decision and you need to take responsibility for it. And I don't even want to hear out of your mouth, we made a big mistake. If you're a leader, we made a big mistake. Now, I know the buck stops with me. Of course, this happened down the chain of command at a different level of the company, but I know the buck stops with me, and so I'll just take responsibility. Fuck you with that. Just come to me and say, we made a mistake and here's how we're fixing it, or here's how I'm fixing it. If you're having to say the buck stops with me and so I know I have to take responsibility, you're not really taking responsibility. You're intimating to me that somebody else made a mistake. So now you're selling somebody on your team down the river.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear about that. Go fire them or whatever, but I really don't want to hear about it. Just fix it. And then I think, because you asked for 4.
Yeah.
I think 4th is, and this is something that I don't think you necessarily have to be born with. I do think you can learn it, but if you have to learn it, then you learn it by watching people that you admire and make sure you pick the right people. Be vital. And by that, I don't mean be integral or fill a niche that nobody else can fill or be indispensable. I mean be vital in terms of your energy, your presence, your charisma. Please speak in every room that you're put into. You have a voice in every room. You might think you don't. You might have imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
But if you don't speak, they'll never remember you were there. You want every room to remember you were there. And there's hardly a thing you could say or a question you could ask in any room that's going to be stupid or that people will think is stupid. In fact, most people, when you speak, they're probably thinking, fuck, I was just going to say that.
Yeah, I should have said that.
I should have said that.
Yeah.
Or I had that question too. Why didn't I ask that? Most people are insecure.
Yeah.
The most secure people are the most insecure people, okay? And make sure you open your mouth in every room. Make sure people make people understand what your energy and your presence is, and you suck some oxygen out of the room when you leave. You can acquire that. You can acquire that in ways that are actually pretty easy. You can speak slowly. You can speak with a deeper voice than you normally speak with. You can adopt a certain tone like you're on stage when you're in certain audiences. But either way, just speak and make sure that you have a vital presence and a vital energy that just emanates off of you. If you don't have that, I can't do anything with you, And don't suck off of other people's energy. Get your own. Don't siphon.
I mean, this sounds like a really good academy. I'm gonna send my kids there because they're gonna come out
When are these kids happening?
I don't know. We gotta talk about that off camera.
That sounded wrong.
Yeah, well, we're gonna have a conversation about getting me a situation. I gotta figure this out. But yeah, I think that's an amazing. I think those principles are amazing. I think if you do have that school, whether online or if it's actually a place, I think the students are gonna come out of that definitely some strong leaders and with some really clear direction.
I'm gonna do some self-marketing then, because I also had I had a show during COVID called From the Office of the CEO.
I remember.
And I did a whole bunch of episodes of that, and I keep threatening people that I'm gonna come back and start doing episodes again. It's a whole different thing than this. So if you guys want to go watch it, it's called From the Office of the CEO, and it's on my YouTube channel, which
I'll put a link down there.
Oh, okay, cool.
We'll make that happen.
Thanks,
Yeah,
technology.
so if you guys want to hear more about what Chelsea has going on, there will be a link below. This is an Imperfect Action show. Chelsea Grayson, Brennan Boyd. We're by the pool. The sun is sunning over here.
The sun is sunning.
Sun is sunning.
Beautiful Los Angeles day. We are so lucky, right?
Yeah, and I appreciate you for being on.
Yeah.
I'll see you guys on another episode, Imperfect Action show. Click the link below. Oh yeah, Imperfect Action Con, October 21, 22. Grab your tickets. There will be a link for that below as well. We'll see you guys on that episode. Peace.
Bye.